Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel once again. I am heading right now over to Delaval Motorsports to see if I can get in a brake and oil change from them. I have a feeling that they're going to be all booked up and tell me to come back next week. I don't typically, have my bike serviced by dealerships because, as you know, most people call them stealerships for a reason. I also want to check my exhaust because I'm going to explain something to you guys that I tried doing. Okay, I think it's alright. Alright, so what I did is I got a aftermarket exhaust from Delcovic. I really liked it. I thought that it was lower weight. It had all the bells and whistles that a aftermarket exhaust could get at an affordable price. But what I soon discovered is that there was a gasket at the end of the exhaust pipe, and most bikes, they have them, but the one on the V-Strom 800 DE just happens to be extremely finicky, and it was just tough enough to try to get it off. So I ended up just returning it, and I ended up popping the stock exhaust back on, but I noticed that there was like some leakage from the bottom portion of the exhaust, so I kind of uninstalled and reinstalled like several times, and I even had a friend help me out. And the third or fourth time we reinstalled it, it wasn't an issue. It sounded fine, but I was still like kind of skeptical because I'm like, dude, I don't need this muffler falling off on me on the middle of the road. So hopefully driving all the way to this place to get this done and then coming back will be a good test to know that it's fine. Aftermarket mods I do like, but to a point, because the way that they make these parts nowadays are so cheap with the metals and screws and everything that you could think of, that it just makes it like 10 times harder to want to mod anything because of emissions and how quiet they want you to be on the road. I do eventually, want to get an aftermarket exhaust for this bike because I think it would sound amazing. I'm probably going to have a professional do it rather than myself, just because, I was kind of close to stripping some bolts before I kind of stopped. And I wasn't even tightening, I was just loosening the bolts with certain tools, and, I'm realizing that, you might need, a little higher quality tool to work on these bikes because of the fact that they have such cheap parts. But yeah, so I don't know. We'll see what happens there. What I did want to get into today, there's a common theme that I'm seeing on YouTube from moto vloggers in general, where they're trying to tell you that a lot of people are not getting into motorcycle riding. The younger generation's too soft and they're just not really into it. And I'm 30 years old, so I'm a millennial. I'm not Gen Z, but I'm kind of on the cusp of Gen Z, if you want to think of it like that. I'm very close to their age bracket. But I can tell you, as like a person that's more on the lower end of the totem pole for a millennial, and I can tell you that I'm a young person, and I've been on motorcycles now for close to 2 years, and obviously dirt bikes and quads when I was younger. I don't necessarily think that people are getting soft and not wanting to ride motorcycles. I mean, our society is soft, yes, but I think there's still a level of people that still want to ride motorcycles. And I looked up the statistics, and what the statistics said is that there was about 4 million to 5 million people that were riding motorcycles in the early 2000s, because most of the vloggers that I've come across on YouTube, they've all said, oh yeah, in the early 2000s people were riding motorcycles like crazy, and there was all this common stuff about people riding. But simply put, there was actually less people that I found out, at least from what the data showed. There's about 4.4 million people. Wow, I have a whole brigade. There's about 4.4 million people that rode in the early 2000s, and that could have been anything from sport bikes to Harleys to cruisers, dual sports, you name it. 2025, or into the 2020s I should say, that number has nearly doubled. We're actually now at 8.8 million people in the United States riding in general. It's either in the United States or globally. I think it's the United States. So this narrative that there's fewer bikers out on the road than there was 20 years ago, I don't think actually cuts it. Especially if you go to other countries and you branch out of the United States for once, and you look at countries like India or even probably the UK, and a lot of these other countries, you know, they ride motorcycles. And some of them, like, you know, in India, they don't have no other choice but to ride a motorcycle, because getting into a car out there is probably 10 times worse than if you were to drive a bike out there, because of the way the roads are, the way that their laws are. I mean, there's a variation of factors. They are a third world country, so there is that component to it as well, which means sometimes cars may not be readily available or affordable. In retrospect, I think these people who follow this narrative of too little bikes on the road, I think they're full of shit. I don't think that they're actually looking at the data, and I think it also varies from state to state. There's one vlogger I watch commonly, and I've mentioned him on this channel very frequently, and you know, I have no problem with him, and I like him a lot. I keep watching his content because it's very insightful, but he lives in a state that's very small. There's only X amount of people, maybe a few million people, compared to states like California or Texas, where there's between 30 and 40 million people. So if you're in a bigger state, you're going to see more bikes on the road. If you're in a smaller state, well, yeah, you may not see as many bikes on the road as you would a bigger state. Simple math. You know, my conclusion is that there is just enough, if not more, motorcyclists on the road than there was 20, 25 years ago. And I think people need to realize that, because motorcycling is not dead. If anything, it's going to continue to grow. I don't know necessarily in the next 20 to 30 years if we'll convert all to e-bikes. I'm hoping not, because I'm just not a fan of those. They're very finicky. You know, you don't have reputable manufacturers yet. Like, if we have Yamaha and Honda and Suzuki potentially making dual sports that are electric, or, you know, crotch rockets or cruisers, okay, all right, let's take a look. I'm very open-minded. I mean, I'm not in favor of it, but I'm very open-minded to it. You know, right now the average e-bike, whether you go with a Sur-On, I think they call it an e-bike Pro, and I think right now they have a full-on electric bike that goes 70 miles an hour called Canyon or something. I forget the name. I watched a video through Revzilla actually about it, and you know, it seems cool, but the range is very reduced. You know, the quality of parts are probably not that great. The parts themselves are probably hard to get, and it's expensive to repair. Now, granted, I'm on a $11,000 to $12,000 bike. If my parts go out, yeah, it could be kind of costly, but then again, I also researched what the parts would cost typically, not including labor, and for this bike's model, for the price point that it's at, it's actually not that bad. It's actually fairly well. You know, whether we go e-bike route, whether we stick to fossil fuels, or whether we have both, which that's what I think most likely will happen, because I think enough people will push back where they're like, yeah, we don't want to do all electric. And case in point, not to get political, but like Donald Trump, he recently shot down a lot of the bills that were going forth in California regarding going EV by 2030. 2035. Again, I think we should have the flexibility of being able to pick which one we want to do, and not solely just rely on one over the other. And with all electric, whether it's vehicles or solar paneling or whatever the case may be, where we're trying to capture a different source of energy than we ever have before with petroleum-based products, I think that's great. I think we should keep innovating. I think we should keep looking into those aspects and areas, but case in point is that stuff hasn't been really tried and true yet. So we don't necessarily know how long term it's going to be. Sure, it's been around for, you know, several hundred years, or 100 years, whatever the case, whenever Nikola Tesla started creating his stuff. But in practice, it's never really been performed. You know, to take full-on solar panels and just not try to, you know, live off of fossil fuels. The whole system is kind of built on that for the last several hundred years, and we're actually running out. The reason why our gas is so high is because we pay for it. We don't produce it. It's a big difference when you produce something in a country rather than buying it, which America tends to do. Whether we go that route or not is to be determined. It's subjective. I think the only way we find out is if we actually test it and see if it actually does indeed do that, or if we have history or data that backs up maybe small areas of the world that tried that method and failed. Then we probably need to look at that and then try to say, hey, if it didn't work in a small country, what makes you think it's going to work in a bigger country at scale? And I know I'm going on and on about this, but the point is, people are riding more bikes today. People may or may not want to go full EV. Surons and all that, they're not street legal. You can easily get them taken away if you're caught doing, you know, over 30 miles an hour in the bike lane. And even if you are following all those precautions, because it's not street legal, you could indeed face some kind of consequence for not being plated, for not having an M1, right? Not having a motorcycle license, because at least in the state of California, e-bikes that do not have pedals are not considered e-bikes. They are considered electric motorcycles. So if there's no regulation and there's no laws on these things, but yet you can buy one, it begs the question of, like, you know, why even go through all that? Why buy something, not have a license, and then potentially get it taken away at a later time due to the fact that there is no power to it, or not power to it, there is no law to it. So those are just some of the things I wanted to kind of give to you guys today. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.